I was taken to the courtroom by my wife, Christiana, whom I had loved deeply for years. She was certain that I wouldn't dare to appear in court. However, when I showed up at the defendant's stand, everyone's faces were filled with shock. They thought I was there to accept punishment. Little did they know, my appearance today was to reclaim everything that once belonged to me. Before the trial began, the judge solemnly inquired, "Plaintiff and defendant, are you aware of the outcome of this trial? If the plaintiff loses, all assets will belong to the defendant, and you will be sentenced to." Before the judge could finish his sentence, someone interrupted him. "If the defendant loses, he will be sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of bail." Christiana looked at me with a fierce gaze, her expression full of disgust, as if she didn't recognize me, the person who had been her close companion for so many years. Sitting beside her, arrogantly holding her shoulder like a husband, was Ezekiel. He looked at me with a defiant and provocative expression. The judge looked at me again. Before he could speak, I lifted my chin, my expression resolute, and loudly declared, "Let the trial begin." Gavril struck the table, and the trial officially commenced. Christiana's first charge against me was that I had abandoned my parents and failed to fulfill my filial obligations. The staff turned on the projector, displaying the specific accusations related to this charge on the big screen. Meanwhile, another screen was streaming live comments from tens of thousands of netizens. "Isn't this David, the eldest son of the Jiao family? He's being sued? No way. I was a diehard fan of his and Christiana's ship back in the day. You can't judge a book by its cover. I didn't expect him to look so gentle and refined, but he's actually so malicious." Seeing the comments flash across the screen, Ezekiel smirked proudly and held Christiana even tighter. I clenched my fists silently. The charges against me were being displayed on the big screen. Appearing on the screen was my grandmother with a head full of white hair and a frail appearance. Her cloudy eyes looked directly into the camera, tears as big as beans rolling down, her voice old and sorrowful. "David, she is the one who loved you the most. She is your blood grandmother. How could you bear to abandon her in a desolate suburb, leaving her to fend for herself? Where's your conscience? Huh?" The jury erupted in murmurs. Christiana clenched her hands tightly on the table, her face etched with pain. Ezekiel gently patted her shoulder, soothing her with a soft voice. While everyone was distracted, he subtly lifted one corner of his mouth and flaunted the ring on his finger, showing off his dominance towards me. I sneered. "He's still smiling. Truly a heartless scoundrel. People like him deserve to die. Life imprisonment. He should be sentenced to death immediately." As netizen furiously sent barrage comments, the judge brought in the equipment and connected it to my entire body. This was the most advanced machinery, capable of extracting all of a person's memories while also functioning as a lie detector. However, it was said that those whose memories were extracted would choose to plead guilty due to the unbearable pain. Ezekiel and Christiana were unaware of the memory extraction application. Ezekiel's complexion visibly darkened, while Christiana continued to look at me with the same intense hatred as always. "I'd like to see what tricks you're planning to play," I declared. The extraction began, and a searing pain attacked me, as if someone was using a knife to slowly carve open my organs. The extracted memories were simultaneously displayed on the big screen. During the 3 years when Mom was divorcing Dad, we lived with my grandparents. My grandfather, who favored sons over daughters, didn't like Mom and, by extension, didn't like me either. However, Grandma treated me very well. She had a pair of skilled hands. She was physically robust and would take me to the river in the summer to catch fish and shrimp. She would gently stroke my head and tenderly say, "David is the bright moon in the sky, Grandma's precious treasure." At 13, I already understood the disputes between adults and knew that every serving of meat Grandma gave me was accompanied by Grandpa's scolding and roaring. I would lie on Grandma's lap, feeling the rough, calloused hands that bore the marks of her years of hard work, and vow, "Grandma, I will make sure you live a good life." Grandma smiled kindly. "We David have the heart for this. Grandma is very satisfied." Memories swiftly flashed through these beautiful recollections. I, who had always been calm, couldn't control my emotions upon seeing Grandma's face, and tears streamed down my cheeks. Christiana was also moved, with tears welling up in her eyes. Grandma treated me well and loved me dearly. Only Ezekiel's face darkened. No way. Such a good grandma, and he did this? Such ingrate. I've never seen such a heartless grandson. The barrage comments were filled with righteous indignation. Meanwhile, I looked at these comments with indifference. At 16, Dad came looking for Mom. He drove a luxury car whose name I couldn't pronounce, dressed in flashy attire, pulled up to our yard, holding a little boy dressed like a prince. It was Ezekiel. Meanwhile, I stood there looking disheveled, wearing clothes from my uncle's younger days. Although Grandma had skillfully altered them, they looked utterly ridiculous in front of Lee. The boy was Ezekiel. Dad and Mom were arguing. Grandpa sycophantically brewed tea for Dad, nodding and flattering him. In ancient times, how could a man not have multiple wives and concubines? It's already good enough. Look, my son-in-law only chose one, unlike those 7 or 8 outside. Who knows how much better he is? Are you even my daughter? If you are, come back with my son-in-law. Mom seemed numb. I hid by the door, watching her with a cold expression, as if she was watching everyone perform in a play. Dad also expressed his heartbreak, stating that he had cut off all contact with that woman. In the end, Mom still went back with Dad. Sitting in the luxurious car, I leaned against the window and saw Grandma standing at the gate, wiping away tears. She kept standing there until the car turned a corner and disappeared from sight. Life in the villa was nowhere near as joyful as living in Grandma's little courtyard. However, after so many years, I managed to endure. After marrying Christiana, I moved into a newly built villa and also brought Grandma along. By that time, Grandma's health was not what it used to be, but it didn't matter. I was wealthy enough to afford her medical treatments. What I hadn't anticipated was that Ezekiel, through some means, managed to persuade Christiana to let him move into our home. After all, he's your brother. He just returned to the country and isn't accustomed to anything. Your father is busy, your mother doesn't take a liking to him, and he only has you, his older brother, Christiana had said. Although I was angry, I chose to compromise time and time again. I provided Ezekiel with everything: top-quality blankets, carpets, a study desk, and a computer, but he dismissed all of it. He walked around the villa, stood in our bedroom with Christiana, and smiled, saying, "I think this room is the best." I was stunned. The room still had our wedding photos hanging inside. He couldn't possibly not recognize what room this was. Suddenly, Grandma appeared, pointing at Ezekiel, and angrily commanded, "Get out. This is David's home." Ezekiel was startled, frowning at Grandma with an unpleasant expression. "What right do you have to speak here, you servant?" Grandma wasn't angry because of Ezekiel's misunderstanding. She stepped forward and forcefully pushed Ezekiel out the door. "Get out." I supported Grandma and looked at Ezekiel, saying, "She's not a servant. She's my grandmother." At that moment, Christiana returned, unaware of the situation. She stood at the staircase entrance and asked, confused, "What's going on?" Ezekiel immediately turned to Christiana. Just moments ago, his face was full of disgust and impatience. It instantly became humble. "Christiana, I'm sorry. I mistakenly thought Grandma was a servant and made your brother angry. He told me to leave. I'll go now." Christiana furrowed her brows and looked at me somewhat angrily, saying, "David, it's normal that Ezekiel doesn't recognize Grandma after such a long time. Why are you being so aggressive?" I tried to defend myself. "It's not me. Ezekiel did it first. Leave Ezekiel's matters to my sister-in-law. You don't need to interfere anymore." Ezekiel followed Christiana as they left. Watching their departing backs, I felt a heavy weight in my chest, but couldn't bring myself to face Christiana to explain. I could only sit on the bed in silent frustration. Grandma tightly hugged me. David, you deserve something better. If you're unhappy here, Grandma will take you and leave this place." Before marrying Grandpa, Grandma had purchased a small house in the countryside, intending to use it as a summer retreat. However, after getting married and having a daughter, her days became dark and oppressive, lasting until she grew old and weak. The small house remained unused all this time. Looking at Grandma's wrinkled face, I felt a pang in my heart. Grandma and I agreed to leave together, to live our own free and unrestrained lives, not having to worry about anyone else's feelings or rely on anyone's favor. But I hadn't expected Ezekiel to interfere. On the afternoon we had planned to leave, I returned home from work to find Grandma missing. I searched the entire villa and questioned every servant, only to discover that Ezekiel had taken Grandma out early in the morning. Feeling uneasy, I hurriedly called Christiana, but her phone kept showing as busy. With no other options, I tried calling Ezekiel. To my surprise, he answered immediately and asked me to meet him at a cafe. At the cafe, Ezekiel greeted me with a smile. Didn't Grandma want to leave? I've already sent her away. No need to thank me too much. A bad feeling grew in my heart. Where did you take Grandma? Ezekiel looked relaxed. We drove for over an hour. There was no one around, and I don't know where she is now. I couldn't believe it. He had abandoned Grandma in a desolate area. Consumed by anger, I stood up, grabbed Ezekiel by the collar, and punched him. Ignoring Ezekiel falling to the ground, I rushed out in a panic. I didn't find Grandma until midnight, in a deserted suburb, inside an abandoned factory. Grandma was leaning against the wall, curled up as if she were merely asleep. The cold winter night was a death sentence for an elderly person already suffering from a severe illness. Grandma had left. What I hadn't anticipated was that when I returned home, I was met with the full fury of my family. My father slapped me across the face, demanding, "Are you even human? How could you abandon Grandma in the wilderness?" I covered my face, staring at him in bewilderment. It was Ezekiel who did this, not me. My stepmother looked at me with disappointment. "David, I always thought you were a kind and sensible child. I never expected you to." Sigh. I don't even know what to say. Ezekiel wiped his crocodile tears and choked out. "If there's a problem, just come to me. Why are you making things difficult for an elderly person?" Amidst everyone's accusations and reproaches, I gradually realized that Ezekiel had made it all seem like I was the one responsible. I stared fixedly at Christiana and whispered, "Christiana, do you believe me?" But I forgot that no matter when, Christiana had never truly stood by my side. She frowned, her eyes filled with disappointment and disgust. "Starting today, I'll be sleeping in the bedroom next door." The memory extraction ended here. The excruciating pain subsided, and I was drenched in cold sweat, gasping for air in large breaths. The jury murmured again, whispering among themselves and frequently glancing toward Ezekiel. The barrage comments couldn't stay still either, frantically flooding the screen. Seen shameless people before, but never this shameless. First time seeing such a despicable man, truly a heartless scoundrel. He deserves life imprisonment. Ezekiel's face had turned unpleasant, and he released his hold on Christiana's shoulder. Christiana furrowed her brows, her expression shocked as she stared at the screen. However, the judge didn't give everyone time to recover. Second charge, narrow-mindedness, physically assaulting others, resulting in injury and lifetime infertility. Ezekiel looked sorrowful as he sat alone on the rooftop. Suddenly, I emerged from behind, grabbed his collar, and began to punch him. Panicking, he turned and started fighting back. During the scuffle, Ezekiel slipped, desperately grabbing my hand, and both of us fell from the high building. The scene flickered to a hospital. A doctor shook his head regretfully, saying, "This accident has injured Ezekiel's lower body, which may result in lifetime infertility." Ezekiel lay on the hospital bed with a pale face, looking sorrowful and reedied. Despite the pain, Christiana held him tenderly, whispering comforting words. The two of them embraced like a married couple. Dressed in a patient gown, I stood at the doorway of the hospital room, staring blankly. No wonder Christiana doesn't like him. Who would love such a heartless, trashy person? What grudges, what resentments? He harmed someone, and he's his own brother. This is directly cutting off his lineage, so malicious. Some netizens mocked sarcastically in the barrage comments, but not a single one showed sympathy or comfort. They firmly believed that I had turned dark and was seeking revenge against Christiana and Ezekiel because of Grandma's death. Metal instruments pierced my skin, connecting to my nerves, extracting my memories. The pain felt like being chopped and carved with knives and axes, almost making me faint. I tightly pinched the flesh on my thigh, not wanting Christiana and Ezekiel to laugh at me. On the screen, my memories began to play. In the third year of my marriage to Christiana, Ezekiel was set to return to the country. On the night I learned of this news, Christiana couldn't sleep and sat in the living room all night. I was in a complicated emotional state and couldn't sleep the entire night. If it weren't for the 5 similarities between me and Ezekiel, Christiana wouldn't have agreed to my proposal. I had loved Christiana for many years and had stayed by her side after she broke up with Ezekiel, helping her recover from her heartbreak and regain her strength. Although I knew she had never truly let go of Ezekiel, I was still happy when she agreed to marry me after I tentatively proposed. However, I didn't expect our happiness to last only 3 years. On the day Ezekiel returned, our whole family went to the airport to pick him up. As soon as he got off the plane, his eyes scanned the crowd, and upon seeing Christiana, a smile instantly appeared on his face. I stood next to Christiana, reaching out to hold her shoulder, trying to let Ezekiel understand that Christiana and I were now legally married. But Christiana acted faster. She quickly stepped forward, naturally pushing the suitcase beside Ezekiel, and walked forward, showing concern and warmth towards him. Compared to her cold demeanor towards me, she was like a completely different person. I knew Christiana had never truly let go of Ezekiel in her heart. In this situation, my love for her left me only with silent bitterness. I naively believed that Christiana and I were married, and this was an unchangeable fact. I thought that with time and my willingness to give, I could change Christiana and make her love me. This illusion of self-deception was shattered when I saw Ezekiel accompanying Christiana to the obstetrics and gynecology department. When I returned home, I found Christiana's previous ultrasound report and realized she was already 2 months pregnant. Ezekiel put out his cigarette, spit on the ground, and looked at me with a somewhat contemptuous gaze. "You discovered it quite late, didn't you?" Actually, the child in Christiana's womb was already there on the night I returned to the country. See, David, even though you and Christiana are legally married, she still couldn't resist coming to me. But it doesn't matter. As a brother, I won't hold it against you. Once my son is born, you can be his bodyguard. The heirs of the Jiao and Li families aren't just any ordinary people. I felt a surge of anger rising within me. My hand hanging by my side gradually clenched into a fist. I couldn't understand why Christiana would betray me. Seeing Ezekiel about to leave, I lost my composure and grabbed his hand tightly. "What do you mean? Christiana couldn't have cheated on me." Ezekiel disdainfully shook off my hand, pulled out a tissue, and disgustedly wiped the spot on Lee's side that I had touched. "What do you mean? Isn't it clearly written? Take a good look. A person's worth lies in their self-awareness. If I were you, I'd have packed up and left a long time ago. It's a pity, though. Even if you begged Christiana, she wouldn't sleep with you." Ezekiel threw a close-up photo of him and Christiana onto my face, then let it fall to the ground. He left triumphantly like a victor, smirking as he departed. My head was throbbing, and my breathing was rapid. I could only lean against the wall, trying to calm myself, but the intense stimulus made my breathing even more rapid, and my mind went blank before I fainted on the ground. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself lying on a hospital bed. A nearby doctor saw me wake up and comforted me. "Sir, you shouldn't get too excited. You have symptoms of hyperventilation. Fortunately, you fainted in the hospital. No matter what the reason, life is the most important thing. You only live once. Don't give up easily because of others." The doctor's words encouraged me. I made up my mind at this time. I would take the initiative and not let Ezekiel succeed. But unexpected events were still about to unfold. Christiana's pregnancy was unstable. Less than 3 months in, there were signs of a miscarriage. Refusing to give up on her and Ezekiel's child, Christiana moved into the hospital. I had already contacted the media to release the news that Miss Lee from the Lee family was suspected to be pregnant. Coincidentally, they captured photos of Ezekiel accompanying Christiana as they processed her admission to the obstetrics department. While Christiana and Ezekiel were busy handling the hospital admission, the internet was ablaze with rumors and speculations about their relationship. People even began to suspect that the child in Christiana's womb was Ezekiel's. All I could say was that the doctor's insight was indeed impressive. As the storm of rumors continued, I chose this moment to make my appearance, weary and dusty, walking into Christiana's intensive care unit. Upon seeing me, Christiana frowned, shielding her belly, and asked, "What are you here for?" I put down the warm bottle in my hand and smiled at her. "Wife, this is the chicken soup I made for you. Drink it and nourish yourself." Perhaps fearing I might tamper with things, Christiana didn't move. I poured myself a bowl of chicken soup and drank it. Then I smiled. "See, no poison. Only then did Christiana reluctantly drink the chicken soup I had prepared for her. The reporters couldn't reach the floor where Christiana's ward was located. When I exited the elevator, I wore a sorrowful expression. Upon seeing the flash of the cameras, I hurriedly forced a somewhat awkward smile. The media held microphones up to me, asking whose child was in Christiana's womb and what the relationship between Ezekiel and Christiana was. I didn't explicitly say anything, merely told the media, the child in Christiana's womb will definitely be the future heir of both the Jiao and Li families. After saying that, I left it to the media to speculate and write about. Within an hour, an article titled Elder Master Jiao Suspiciously Pregnant. Miss Li's child suspected to be Jiao's second master's son went viral on social media. However, Christiana and Ezekiel surprisingly didn't come to confront me. I intended to get to the bottom of things, but overheard Christiana and Ezekiel's conversation at the entrance of the ward. David probably knows I'm carrying your child. Ezekiel, what should we do? Don't worry, if David dies, it won't matter anymore. Standing at the door, my breathing began to quicken again. I could only try my best to calm myself. I had never imagined that Christiana and Ezekiel would actually want to kill me. Snowflake patterns flashed across the screen, then exaggeratedly distorted. The judge stood up, waving to signal the technician to come over. This was the first time during a live trial that a monitor had malfunctioned. The technician meticulously inspected it for a while before announcing that the memory extraction was too painful for the subject, triggering the body's protective mechanism. Barrage comments updated in real time. Oh my God, I've never seen anything like this before. How painful must the subsequent events be? My goodness, people may know faces but not hearts. Ezekiel, extract the memories quickly. I need to see what happens next. As the barrage comments intensified, Christiana cleared her throat and announced her request. The rest of the events everyone has already seen. Christiana, are you even human? Just as the audience's attention shifted to the previous playback where I pushed Ezekiel off the building, injuring his lower body and causing his infertility, a young voice suddenly emerged, breaking the deadlock. It's the doctor from that day. Oh my God, why is she here? The truth behind the events is about to be unveiled. We're about to find out who the real villain is. I stand with Elder Master David. A child raised by grandma can't be a bad person. That's not necessarily true. People with closed personalities often end up being antisocial. The barrage comments erupted into chaos once again. The judge took the paper handed to him by the clerk, adjusted his glasses, and carefully read it. He then struck the gavel, signaling for silence throughout the courtroom. Dr. Victoria has come to testify for Elder Master David. Based on the principles of fairness and justice, if Victoria's testimony is found to be false, she will also be sentenced to life imprisonment and stripped of her personal assets. Dr. Victoria's memories were quickly extracted. Ezekiel held a test report, his eyes filled with shock. The report showed that Ezekiel had low sperm viability, and the signs of fetal arrest in Christiana's womb were closely related to him. However, the child in Christiana's womb was something he had worked hard to conceive. If the child was lost, given his current condition, making Christiana pregnant again was simply impossible. But the doctor stated that if Christiana didn't undergo surgery, she would be in danger. Ezekiel hesitated multiple times. Such a disgraceful matter. He didn't want a third person to know about it. Doctor, if someone accidentally falls from upstairs and hits their lower body, would that cause infertility for me? I didn't expect Ezekiel to be so ruthless. Victoria's expression was somewhat conflicted. Mr. Jiao, you only have oligospermia, which is treatable. There's no need to harm yourself like this. Victoria was Christiana's consultant doctor, and this hospital was also run by the Li family. She had seen many of these high society intrigues, but she chose not to expose them. Spare him, Mr. Jiao, Victoria carefully advised Ezekiel. Even if Miss Christiana can't keep the baby, as long as you receive proper treatment, you can still have children in the future. What do you know? Ezekiel glared at Victoria, his eyes filled with madness. I never imagined Christiana would marry David. I proposed to her so many times, she never accepted. She agreed to that fool David. I don't know if it was the old thing that had a conscience, but in the will you gave David an extra 15% stake. Plus the 10% he already had. He has more than me. If I hadn't tightened my grip on Christiana to make her divorce David, do you think I'd still have the time to sit here and talk to you? Christiana only says she loves me. If anything were to happen between us, she would have been too shy. If I hadn't spiked her drink, she wouldn't have stayed that night. I'm also a young master of the Jiao family. I'm no worse than David. Why should I yield to David just because I'm an illegitimate child? I won't make a wedding dress for him. Ezekiel vented all his frustrations, furiously putting on his coat and leaving the reception room. The scene shifted to my hospital room. I was dressed in a patient gown, pale-faced, my mind filled with the image of Ezekiel dragging me down the stairs. He had clearly intended for me to die. If I hadn't been cushioned by the rain shelter when we fell, I don't think I would have only broken a few ribs. Meanwhile, I hadn't noticed Victoria entering to check my medical records, urging the nurse to take good care of me. Later, Ezekiel was diagnosed with severe lower body injuries, resulting in lifetime infertility. A few days later, on a deep night, I was ambushed in an alley and stabbed in the abdomen. If it weren't for my aunt passing by and calling an ambulance, I might have died. The emergency room light stayed on all night, and I finally escaped danger. While Ezekiel was surrounded by people in the hospital, being comforted and accompanied, I lay alone on the hospital bed, enduring the pain from my stab wound. I hadn't been discharged yet and hadn't recovered from the fact that Ezekiel and Christiana had hired someone to stab me. New blows followed swiftly. I received a summons to be taken to the lifetime court by Christiana and Ezekiel. Just a single summons seemed completely inadequate to help Christiana's true love vent her rage. The next day, several enterprises under the Jiao family filed a lawsuit against me in the commercial court, accusing me of abusing my company authority and leaking trade secrets. On the third day, the Li family's enterprises also sued me for losing public trust, causing Li stock to plummet, and claiming that I needed to take responsibility. On the fourth day, a vibrant red invitation stood out conspicuously inside a white summons. Struggling to get up and confront Christiana and Ezekiel, I ignored my weakened body and fell to the ground, tearing my already unhealed wound once more. In my state of low spirits, Victoria arrived. Oh my God, the infighting within wealthy families is truly inhumane. Sometimes not having money is a kind of happiness. While the barrage comments lamented the ruthless internal battles of wealthy families, Victoria's image flashed rapidly on the screen. Unable to tolerate Ezekiel and Christiana's actions, her conscience unblemished, she chose to help me fight the lawsuits. Due to her poor health, Victoria assisted me in collecting many documents. We often discussed matters late into the night. These actions became Christiana's third charge against me. Having an affair with the family doctor, framing Christiana, and causing the lovesick Christiana to almost consider suicide. Fortunately, Victoria was a step ahead, anticipating Christiana's accusations. As a result, we never discussed matters alone. From outside, only our two figures could be seen sitting together behind the drawn curtains, but the surveillance inside clearly showed a busy room full of people. By this point, Christiana's face was already extremely unpleasant. Ezekiel, who had thought he was certain of driving me into hell, dared not speak ill of me any more upon seeing this situation. Christiana, enraged, stood up from the plaintiff's seat and threw a stack of photos and several ultrasound reports in front of me. I almost forgot that half a year ago, I had accompanied my cousin, who had been treated well by grandma except for my grandfather, to her prenatal checkup. She had been deceived by her ex-boyfriend and lost her virginity. Initially, she wanted to abort the child, but the doctor said she had difficulty conceiving, and if she aborted the child, it would be very hard for her to have children in the future, so she decided to keep it. However, she didn't dare tell anyone except me, her cousin. I accompanied her to the prenatal checkup, but I didn't expect that Christiana had already hired someone to follow me, trying to capture evidence of my affair. Fortunately, after Ezekiel returned, he forced me and her to divorce. Half a year ago, David accompanied a woman to a prenatal checkup. Now this child is almost a month old, and I've been sleeping separately from him for almost a year. If I lost the lawsuit as the main plaintiff, Christiana would also be sentenced to lifetime imprisonment, an outcome he couldn't accept. Moreover, my uterus is malformed. Otherwise, I would have been pregnant with David's child. Long ago, for her own benefit, Christiana revealed a secret she intended to hide for a lifetime. It seemed that the signs of fetal arrest in her and Ezekiel's child were not only because Ezekiel had oligospermia, but also because of her uterine malformation. Ridiculous. In her youth, Christiana had been taken by her mother to see a doctor due to irregular menstrual periods. She knew her uterus was malformed, but neither Christiana nor her mother dared to speak up, especially since Christiana was the only heir of the Lee family. Additionally, Christiana was designated by her grandfather as the future heir. If the Lee family found out that Christiana couldn't bear children, they might find a suitable heir outside, justifying Lee's father to seek a son from elsewhere. Lee's mother was unwilling to give up the hard-earned wealth. After all, her uterine malformation hadn't affected Christiana's normal life. Once Christiana fully obtained the Lee family's inheritance rights, she could undergo treatment without delay. However, this was postponed until now. Therefore, she was unwilling to marry Ezekiel for this reason. So she was unwilling to give up the child she had worked so hard to conceive. Unfortunately, she didn't anticipate that Ezekiel had also concealed his oligospermia. The judge's face darkened as he signaled the technician to attach the memory extraction device to Christiana. Finally, the truth was about to be unveiled. Because of this unspeakable secret, Christiana had maintained a so-called platonic love with Ezekiel, being reluctant to agree to his marriage proposals. Major media outlets competed to report that the heir to the Lee family had been infatuated with Ezekiel, second master of the Jiao family, ever since their breakup, even unwilling to settle for the sake of the family. However, over time, Christiana needed to get married and have the next heir to the family. Moreover, opponents seized the opportunity to attack the Lee family's reputation by spreading rumors that Ezekiel and Christiana were contractual lovers and that Christiana was homosexual, causing the Lee family's stock and enterprise valuations to plummet. Under such circumstances, Christiana had to quickly find someone to date and marry to quell the rampant rumors. Although she deeply loved Ezekiel, she knew that Ezekiel wanted to marry her merely to suppress the second master of the Jiao family. If he discovered her secret, he would probably abandon her and expose everything. Extremely ridiculous. Christiana, who found everyone else disagreeable, was infatuated with Ezekiel to the point of being love-struck. She couldn't reveal her own secret and could only watch her beloved fly away, too afraid to stop him. Under these conditions, Christiana set her sights on me, who had always loved her silently. I will never forget the day she proposed to me. It was a lazy afternoon. I had just woken up and went downstairs to see Christiana sitting in my living room. At that time, Grandma was still alive. Her eyes sparkled, and she smiled at me, taking my hand and shyly kissing my cheek. She told Grandma that she had liked me for a long time and wanted to walk hand in hand with me through the days to come. The afternoon sunlight filtered through the tall camphor tree leaves outside the window, scattering golden spots that made her look as beautiful as an angel. Her eyes were lovely peach blossom eyes, filled entirely with me. The days that followed were just as the memory extraction device replayed. After marriage, I was always the one giving, loving deeply, but in return faced betrayal and harm. That girl isn't David's lover. She's his cousin, and the child isn't his either. It's his cousin's and her ex-boyfriend's. Victoria broke the silence, throwing out a paternity test report that showed the child had no blood relation to me and that there was a 99.9% probability the child was biologically hers and her cousin's. Victoria's father was the consultant doctor for the Lee family, dedicating his life to serving them. Victoria and Christiana had been childhood playmates. Originally, when Christiana discovered her uterus malformation, she didn't think much of it. It was only her mother occasionally whispering in her ear that made her feel like she was truly irreparably malformed. Over time, her psyche became distorted. This psychological distortion completely erupted after she fell in love with Ezekiel. She wanted to hold on to Ezekiel, but knew she had difficulty conceiving. First, she begged Victoria to bear a child for Ezekiel in her place, but Victoria firmly refused. Later, she decided to drug both Victoria and Ezekiel, confining them to a room to force them into intimacy. When Victoria came to her senses, she was devastated and wanted to report Christiana and Ezekiel for drugging and raping her. However, Christiana threatened Victoria by involving her hospitalized father, demanding that Victoria bear Ezekiel's child on her behalf. Victoria's father had been a doctor all his life, and after retiring, developed severe bipolar dementia, requiring 24-hour care. The exorbitant medical expenses burdened young Victoria, who had just graduated from medical school and had no job. Her family's lifetime savings were all spent on her father's treatment. Watching her elderly father lying in bed, Victoria chose to silently endure the humiliation. After several years bedridden, her father passed away, and Victoria originally thought she could finally leave the despicable family. But Christiana recorded videos of her and Ezekiel in bed to blackmail her. Even if Ezekiel left, Christiana forbade Victoria from leaving. Christiana claimed that since she was already malformed, the Lee family's future heirs would still have to come from Victoria's womb. Thus, Victoria lived numbly day after day, waiting for a moment to take down Christiana. This included spreading rumors that Christiana was homosexual. Unfortunately, Christiana quickly married me, making such rumors collapse on their own. Victoria lay in wait and finally seized the opportunity when Ezekiel returned to the country. She wanted to kill the men who had raped her, but more importantly, she aimed to take down both Ezekiel and Christiana. She had been constantly encouraging Ezekiel, telling him that he must ensure Christiana conceived a child with blood from both the Jiao and Li families to legitimately win the power struggle within the wealthy clans. In reality, Christiana had already undergone surgery to cure her uterine malformation. Being a generational consultant doctor and coupled with Christiana's previous car accident, no one knew the truth. She had also instructed the family chef that Christiana, upon discharge, was physically weak and needed to focus on her diet for recovery. The chef dared not say anything. Hidden deep within, Christiana took bowl after bowl of fertility-enhancing drugs. Besides the fertility drugs, Victoria retaliated by giving Christiana and her bodyguard other medications to induce labor and keep them confined together. Christiana hadn't fully recovered from surgery and forcibly tried to have a child, but the child couldn't be kept. As for Ezekiel, he was merely a pawn in Victoria's plan. To ensure my plan was foolproof, after you underwent the pregnancy termination surgery, I tested the blood relation of the child in your womb, Victoria calmly explained while holding the memory extraction device, feeling satisfied for finally getting her revenge. In simple terms, the child in your womb is indeed your child. Victoria suddenly sat up, staring intently at Christiana. But the father of the child isn't Ezekiel, nor is it David, but the bodyguard next to you. I suggest you take a look at the explicit screenshots of you and your bodyguard on social media before they get blocked. Victoria's words drifted through the courtroom like a ghost, sending chills down people's spines and leaving their faces pale, with no one speaking for a long time. The matter was finally concluded. Christiana and Ezekiel became despised outcasts, and I was set to restart my life.